Once upon a time, long ago, there was a boy named John Keats. He was born in London, a big, busy city full of noise and people. His family wasn't rich or famous. His father looked after horses at a stable, a place called an inn. John was the oldest of 4 children, and he was a lively, energetic boy. He loved his brothers, George and Tom, and his little sister Frances very much. They would play together, and John was always full of fun and mischief. He was known for being quite a character, strong and ready for anything. Life seemed ordinary, but inside this ordinary boy, something extraordinary was waiting to grow. But sometimes life takes a sudden, sad turn. When John was only 8 years old, his father had a terrible accident and died. This was a huge shock for the whole family. It was like a dark cloud had suddenly covered their sunny sky. His mother was so sad. A little while later, she married again, but it didn't last. She left, and the children went to live with their grandmother. It was a difficult time, full of change and worry. John had to grow up very quickly. He felt a big responsibility to look after his younger siblings, to be strong for them when everything felt so uncertain and shaky. Things became even harder when John's mother came back, but she was very ill. The illness was called tuberculosis, or consumption as they called it back then. John, who was just a teenager, helped to nurse her. He sat by her bed, read to her, and did everything he could to make her comfortable. But the illness was too strong, and she passed away. Now, John and his siblings were orphans. They had lost both their parents. This deep sadness stayed with John for the rest of his life. It made him think a lot about life and death, about happiness and sorrow, and these big feelings would later pour into his wonderful poems. Living with his grandmother, John found a new stability. His grandmother, Alice Jennings, loved her grandchildren dearly and wanted the best for them. She made sure they had a good home and were looked after. It was during this time that John was sent to a small, friendly school in a town called Enfield. The headmaster's son, a young man named Charles Cowden Clark, became a very important person in John's life. He wasn't just a teacher, he was a friend. He saw that John was a bright and curious boy. This school and this special friendship would open up a whole new world for John, a world filled with books, ideas, and the magic of poetry. John's grandmother wanted him to have a safe and sensible job, so after he left school, it was decided that he would become a doctor. He became an apprentice to a surgeon, which is like being a doctor's assistant. For years, he studied medicine. He learned about the human body, about illnesses and cures. He even went to a hospital in London to continue his training. He was good at it too. He passed his exams and became a licensed apothecary, which meant he was qualified to practice medicine. It seemed like his future was all set out for him. He would be Mr. John Keats, the doctor helping people who were sick. But while John's hands were busy learning about medicine, his mind was busy exploring something else entirely, poetry. His friend from school, Charles Cowden Clark, had introduced him to the great poets of the past, like Edmund Spenser. John fell completely in love with the sound of words, the rhythm of lines, and the beautiful pictures that poems could paint in his head. He started reading every poem he could find. He would carry a book of poetry with him, reading it whenever he had a spare moment. The world of medicine was about facts and science, but the world of poetry was about feelings, imagination, and beauty. A moment came when John had to make a very big choice. Should he be a doctor with a steady job and a secure life? Or should he follow his heart and become a poet, a path that was uncertain and offered no promise of money or success? It was a brave and difficult decision. Imagine telling your family that you want to give up a good career to write poems. But John's passion for poetry was too strong to ignore. He felt a fire inside him, a need to create, to put his thoughts and feelings into beautiful words. He chose poetry. He decided to dedicate his life to capturing beauty in verse. This was the true beginning of John Keats, the poet. He started writing his own poems, trying to find his own voice. He met other young writers and artists in London, people who also had big dreams. One of his new friends was a man named Leigh Hunt, who was a famous writer and editor. Leigh Hunt believed in John's talent. He encouraged him and even published one of John's first poems in his magazine. This was a huge moment for John. It was like a sign telling him that he had made the right choice. He was no longer just a medical student, he was a poet, and his incredible journey was just beginning. Being a poet was not easy. John's first book of poems was published, but hardly anyone noticed it. Some people who did read his work wrote very unkind things about it. They made fun of him because he didn't come from a rich family or go to a fancy university. They were cruel critics who tried to crush his spirit. For many people, this would have been enough to make them give up. It must have been very hurtful to see his dreams dismissed so harshly. But John Keats was not someone who gave up easily. He had a deep belief in himself and in the power of poetry. He knew he had more to say, so he kept writing. He worked incredibly hard, pushing himself to learn and grow as a poet. And then something amazing happened. In just 1 year, a period of unbelievable creativity, he wrote some of the most famous and beautiful poems in the English language. He wrote Ode to a Nightingale, where he listens to a bird song and dreams of flying away from all his worries. He wrote Ode on a Grecian Urn, where he looks at ancient pictures on a vase and thinks about how art can last forever. He also wrote To Autumn, a perfect description of the beautiful golden season. These poems were full of stunning images and deep feelings. During this time, John also found love. He met a young woman named Fanny Brawn. She lived next door, and they quickly became very close. John fell deeply in love with her. He wrote her beautiful, heartfelt letters, telling her how much she meant to him. His love for Fanny inspired him and brought him great happiness, but it also brought him sadness. John was a poor poet with no steady income. He felt he couldn't ask Fanny to marry him because he couldn't provide for her. This situation caused him a lot of pain and worry, a feeling of being trapped between his love and his difficult circumstances. Despite these struggles, John's friendships with other poets like Percy Bysshe Shelley gave him support. They shared ideas and encouraged one another in a world that wasn't always kind to new artists. John's determination was incredible. He faced bad reviews, money problems, and worries about his love life. But he never stopped striving for greatness. He believed that beauty was a form of truth and that his job as a poet was to share that beauty with the world. He kept his focus, pouring all his energy, his joy and his sorrow into creating poems that were stronger and more brilliant than ever before. Sadly, the same illness that had taken his mother and his beloved brother Tom began to affect John too. He started to get sick with tuberculosis. In those days, there was no cure for this disease. John, with his medical training, knew exactly what was happening to his body, which must have been terrifying. His health grew worse and worse. He became too weak to write. The poet who was once so full of life and energy now struggled just to get through each day. His friends were terribly worried about him. They knew that the cold, damp English winter would be very bad for his lungs. His doctors and friends decided that his only hope was to travel to a warmer, sunnier place. They chose Italy, so John said a heartbreaking goodbye to Fanny Brawn, knowing deep down that he would probably never see her again. He sailed to Rome with his friend, an artist named Joseph Seven. The journey was long and difficult. In Rome, Joseph cared for John with great kindness and dedication, but the illness was relentless. John Keats, the brilliant young poet who had so much more to give, died in Rome. He was only 25 years old, a life cut tragically short. On his gravestone, at his own request, they did not put his name. Instead, they carved the words, "Here lies one whose name was writ in water." John felt that he had failed, that he would be forgotten, his name disappearing, just like words written on water. For a while it seemed like he might be right, but he was wrong. After his death, his friends made sure his poems were published and read. Slowly, people began to realize just how special his work was. More and more readers discovered the beauty, the wisdom, and the powerful emotion in his poetry. Today, more than 200 years later, John Keats is known as one of the greatest poets who ever lived. His name is not written in water. It is carved in stone. His poems are read and loved by people all over the world, from young students to grown-up scholars. They are celebrated for their incredible beauty and for how they speak to the human heart. John Keats's life was short and full of sadness, but his words have defied time. He showed us that even in the face of hardship, it is possible to create something beautiful that lasts forever. His voice, full of wonder and courage, still rings out as loud and clear as ever.